The Afghan sun hadn't yet cleared the eastern ridgeline when Captain Bryn Gallagher made her fifth scope adjustment of the morning. Her fingers moved with practiced precision across the Remington M24's turret, compensating for the 8-mile-per-hour crosswind that swept across forward operating base Reaper like the breath of some ancient desert god. 5 foot 4 inches of coiled tension, she lay perfectly still in the observation post. The kind of stillness that separated the living from the dead in her profession. 72% humidity, temperature rising to 94 degrees. Coriolis effect negligible at this latitude and range, but she calculated it anyway. Her mother had taught her that. Calculate everything. Assume nothing. Stay alive. Through the Leopold scope, the abandoned village materialized in crystalline detail 800 yards downrange. Mud brick compounds, crumbling walls. The skeletal remains of a Soviet-era BTR-60 rusting in the courtyard like a monument to forgotten wars. Intelligence suggested high-value targets would transit through the village within the hour. Members of a cell responsible for 17 American deaths last month. 17 families who would never be whole again. Storms building in the east, Lieutenant Griffin Sawyer muttered beside her, his voice barely audible above the wind. 2 hours, maybe less. Bryn's eye never left the scope. Sawyer had been her spotter for 14 months. A solid operator from Georgia, steady hands, steadier nerves. The kind of man who understood that in their world, silence saved lives more often than words. The rifle beneath her hands was more than metal and wood. Engraved along the stock in fading script, for Bryn, aim true KG, her mother's initials. Lieutenant Commander Kathleen Gallagher, the first female naval aviator to die in Iraqi combat operations. February 14, 2007. 17 years ago, tomorrow. Bryn had been 10 years old when the Navy chaplain arrived at their door in Virginia Beach. She remembered every detail, the way afternoon sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, the smell of her grandmother's pot roast in the oven, the knock that changed everything. Her hands tremored. Just slightly. Just enough. "You solid, Captain," Sawyer's voice carried concern beneath the professional veneer. "Always am," Bryn replied. The lie tasted familiar on her tongue. She forced her breathing to slow. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out. The technique her mother had taught her during their last visit before deployment. Back when Bryn still believed her mother was invincible. Back when she believed the good guys always came home. Through the scope, movement flickered at the village's northern edge. 3 vehicles, Toyota Hilux trucks, the weapon of choice for insurgents from Kandahar to Kabul. Bryn's finger moved to the trigger guard. Not on the trigger. Never on the trigger until the shot was certain. "Confirm visual on target package," she whispered into her radio. 3 vehicles, northern approach vector. The command center's response crackled in her earpiece. "Standby rain check actual." Bryn's jaw tightened. She hated that call sign. Too cute. Too diminutive. Like everything else in her career that reminded her she was fighting twice as hard for half the recognition. 37 confirmed kills. More than any other sniper currently deployed in theater. But still the doubters persisted. Her scope tracked the lead vehicle. The driver's side window resolved into sharp focus. She could see the driver's face now. Bearded, 40s, wearing a black turban that marked him as Taliban leadership. Her heartbeat slowed to 42 beats per minute. The sweet spot, where training became instinct and instinct became precision. "Rain check actual abort mission." The voice in her earpiece hit like cold water. "Return to base immediately. Direct order from General Brennan." Sawyer's curse was creative and quiet. "We've been in position for 18 hours. Target window opens in 20 minutes. Bryn's world narrowed to the crosshairs centered on the driver's temple. One shot, one enemy commander who would never order another attack. One family that might stay whole. Her finger ached to move those final 2 millimeters to the trigger. "Copy that," she said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "Breaking down position now." Professional, always professional, even when every instinct screamed to take the shot anyway. They packed in silence. Sawyer handled the spotting scope and rangefinder while Bryn secured her rifle. Each movement was ritual. Each piece of equipment returned to its precise place. In their world, and sloppiness killed. Disorder meant death. As Sawyer collapsed the camouflage netting, something caught Bryn's eye. Metallic glint in the dirt where their position had been. She knelt, fingers brushing aside sand and pebbles. A spent cartridge, 7.62 by 54R. Russian specification, not the 7.62 by 39 that Taliban fighters use in their AK-47s. This was sniper ammunition, Dragunov or something similar. Someone had been in this exact position, recently. You seeing this? She held up the casing. Sawyer's expression darkened. Taliban don't use Russian sniper rounds. Bryn pocketed the evidence and kept searching. 3 feet from the casing, partially buried, she found a scrap of laminated paper. Tactical map fragment. Cyrillic text marked coordinates and elevations. Her Russian was functional enough to recognize military terminology, and there marked with a precise X was their current position. Someone knew we'd be here, she said. This feels like Mogadishu 93, Sawyer replied, referencing the famous ambush that had killed 18 American soldiers. Like we're being positioned. The drive back to FOB Reaper took 40 minutes. Enough time for the fury in Bryn's chest to crystallize into something colder. More dangerous. By the time they passed through the outer checkpoint, she had already decided she would find out why General Victor Brennan had pulled them off target. The forward operating base buzzed with unusual activity, extra security at the gates, Humvees positioned in defensive perimeters. And at the center of it all, like a black hole warping everything around it, sat 3 Blackhawks bearing the markings of CENTCOM command staff. General's here for his inspection tour, Sawyer observed. Wonderful timing. Bryn had never met General Brennan in person, but his reputation preceded him like a shockwave. Brilliant tactician, ruthless disciplinarian, and according to every female officer who had ever served under him, a man who believed women belonged anywhere except a combat zone. He had blocked her last 2 promotion recommendations. Despite her record, despite her wheels, despite the commendations that should have guaranteed her elevation to major by now. Each rejection had come with the same bureaucratic language about concerns regarding physical standards and questions about suitability for advanced combat roles. Translation, you're a woman and I don't think you belong here. Bryn reported to the command center as ordered, her rifle case slung across her back. The weight of it grounded her, reminded her why she was here. The case had belonged to her mother. Kathleen had carried it through 2 deployments before that final mission. Now it carried Bryn's weapon. Legacy made manifest in canvas and leather. Inside the command center had transformed into a theater of military pageantry. Officers stood at attention in pressed uniforms. Maps covered every surface. And there at the center, like a medieval king holding court, stood General Victor Brennan, 58 years old, 6'2". The kind of bearing that demanded deference. His uniform was parade ground perfect, despite the 100-degree heat. Silver hair cropped military short. Eyes that assessed and dismissed with equal speed. Colonel Deirdre Blackwood caught Bryn's eye from across the room. Blackwood was one of the few senior female officers in theater. 52 years old, tough as titanium and twice as sharp. She had been her mother's classmate at Annapolis, one of the few people who understood what it meant to be a Gallagher in uniform. The colonel's expression carried a warning. Be careful, Brennan's hunting today. Captain Gallagher, General Brennan's voice cut through the room's ambient noise like a blade through silk. Your unit was pulled from surveillance for a reason. Bryn came to attention, her rifle case still on her shoulder. Yes, sir. Brennan circled her slowly, predatory, assessing. His eyes lingered on the rifle case with something that looked like contempt. I've reviewed your file, he continued. Impressive numbers on paper, but I question your suitability for what's coming. With respect, sir, my record speaks for itself. The general's laugh was cold. Arctic, the kind of sound that preceded bad news. Records can be misleading, Captain. This operation requires physical strength and mental fortitude that some smaller soldiers might lack. The room fell silent. Every officer present understood what had just happened. The general hadn't just questioned her capabilities. He had done it publicly, deliberately. A power play designed to humiliate. Before Bryn could respond, Brennan reached for her rifle case. Not asking, simply taking. His hands closed around the canvas straps. Your mother's weapon, I understand. He lifted it from her shoulder without permission. Sentiment makes weak soldiers, Captain. Sir, I don't speak unless spoken to, girl. The slap came fast, precise. Brennan's hand connected with the rifle case, tearing it from Bryn's grip. The case hit the floor with a crash that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Inside, she heard the scope impact against something hard, possibly damaged, definitely disrespected. Bryn stared at the case on the floor, at the scuff mark now visible on the leather, at the visible scratch across her mother's initials. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Every nerve in her body screamed to respond, to fight, to make him understand what he had just done. But she was a professional, she was her mother's daughter, and she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Colonel Blackwood moved forward. General Captain Gallagher is one of our most accomplished. Stand down, Colonel. Brennan's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I'm not interested in participation trophies. He turned back to the assembled officers, dismissing Bryn as if she no longer existed. Intelligence reports a high-level meeting of insurgent leaders happening tonight. We're sending in a strike team. Lieutenant Sawyer will lead the operation. Sawyer straightened unconsciously, surprise evident on his face. He had half Bryn's experience, a quarter of her confirmed kills. But he had one qualification that apparently mattered more than any of that. He was a man. Colonel Blackwood, Brennan continued, brief Lieutenant Sawyer on the insertion plan. I want boots on target by midnight. As the briefing continued, Bryn knelt to retrieve her rifle case. Her fingers traced the new scratch across her mother's initials. The metal was cold beneath her touch. She could feel eyes on her, pitying, embarrassed. But no one spoke. No one challenged the general. This was how it worked, how it had always worked. You fought twice as hard, achieved twice as much, and still found yourself dismissed by men who saw your gender before they saw your service. The briefing lasted another 30 minutes. Brennan outlined an insertion plan that made Bryn's tactical sense scream warnings. The coordinates he selected placed Sawyer's team on an exposed ridge. Perfect ambush terrain. The extraction route crossed Wadi al-Kabir, where 4 Marines had died to an IED last month. Every decision seemed designed to maximize risk rather than minimize it. Either General Brennan was incompetent or he was deliberately sending men into danger. Bryn studied the map as the general spoke. The insertion point was less than a kilometer from where she and Sawyer had been positioned this morning. The same area where she had found Russian ammunition and tactical maps with coordinates marked in Cyrillic. Her mind raced through possibilities. None of them good. When the briefing finally concluded, officers dispersed to their various duties. Sawyer approached Bryn with an expression caught between guilt and resignation. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. I know. Bryn shouldered her rifle case carefully, mindful of potential scope damage. But watch your 6 out there. Those coordinates feel wrong. The general wouldn't send us into a trap. Wouldn't he? Sawyer had no answer to that. He left to prepare his team, leaving Bryn alone in the emptying command center. She pulled out the Russian cartridge and map fragment from her pocket. Evidence of something larger. Something dangerous. Captain Gallagher, my office, now. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried no room for argument. Bryn followed her out of the command center across the dusty compound to a prefab structure that served as senior officer quarters. Inside, the temperature was marginally cooler. Maps and reports covered every surface. A photograph on the desk showed a younger Blackwood standing beside Bryn's mother, both in dress whites at their Annapolis graduation. Blackwood closed the door and activated a white noise generator, standard procedure for sensitive conversations. When she turned back to Bryn, her expression had shifted from professional to something approaching alarm. Something's not right, she said without preamble. Brennan arrived this morning with his own intelligence officer, someone I've never seen in any briefings, someone who doesn't appear in any database I can access. Who is he? Calls himself Major Volkov, claims he's attached from CENTCOM's intelligence division. Blackwood pulled up a photograph on her laptop. I ran his biometrics through every system I have access to. Nothing. It's like he doesn't exist. The man in the photograph was unremarkable. 40s, Slavic features, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. But his eyes carried the flat, calculated expression of someone who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Russian, Bryn asked. That would be my guess. But officially, he's an American intelligence officer with full security clearances and authorization from the highest levels. Blackwood pulled up another screen. Communications logs, encrypted traffic patterns. I've been monitoring base communications since Brennan arrived. There's encrypted traffic between this Volkov and an unknown source outside our security perimeter, using protocols I don't recognize. You think Sawyer's team is walking into an ambush. I think the coordinates Brennan selected are suicide. I think pulling you off surveillance this morning wasn't coincidence. And I think whatever's happening tonight, we're not seeing the full picture. Bryn's mind assembled the pieces. The Russian ammunition, the tactical maps with marked positions, Brennan's deliberate humiliation, an intelligence officer who didn't exist in official databases, an insertion plan designed to maximize casualties. We need to warn them, she said. Brennan has isolated Sawyer's unit. No communication until they're in position. Radio silence protocol. Blackwood pulled a satellite phone from her desk drawer. This bypasses standard channels. Encrypted, untraceable. She handed it to Bryn along with a set of night vision equipment and a tactical GPS. I'm officially ordering you to conduct reconnaissance ahead of Sawyer's insertion point. Confirm the area is clear of enemy activity. Report any anomalies directly to me using this phone. It was the thinnest possible cover for what was essentially an unauthorized solo mission into hostile territory. If Brennan found out, both their careers would be over. If Bryn was killed, Blackwood would face court-martial for sending an officer into danger without proper authorization. Why are you doing this? Bryn asked. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. She reached for the photograph on her desk. Her and Kathleen Gallagher, young and full of conviction, ready to change the world. Your mother was my classmate, my friend. She died investigating contractor fraud in Iraq. Her FA-18 went down 3 days after she filed her report. They called it enemy fire, but the investigation was buried so fast it left skid marks. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother found evidence of $50 million in fraudulent reconstruction contracts. I'm saying she was going to testify to the Inspector General. I'm saying her aircraft was sabotaged and the investigation was shut down by officers with enough rank to make it disappear. Blackwood met Bryn's eyes. Officers like Brennan. The words hit like physical blows. 17 years. 17 years of believing her mother died in combat, died honorably, died serving her country, and now this, the possibility that she had been murdered, silenced, eliminated like a problem to be solved. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because the men who killed her are still in power. Because the corruption she found still exists. Because you were 10 years old and needed to believe your mother was a hero. She was a hero. Yes, she was. Blackwood's voice carried absolute conviction. And if we don't stop what's happening tonight, more heroes are going to die the same way she did. Murdered by their own side. Sacrificed for profit. Bryn's hands were steady now. The tremor from this morning was gone, replaced by something colder, harder, the kind of certainty that came from purpose aligned with training. What time does Sawyer insert? Midnight, 3 hours from now. Then I need to move. Blackwood nodded. There's a local contractor named Thornton, ex-SAS, works security for our supply convoys. He'll get you close to the target area without going through official channels. And if I find what I think I'm going to find, then you document it, you survive, and you bring me proof that I can take to someone higher up the chain than Brennan. Bryn secured the satellite phone and night vision gear. Her rifle case felt heavier now, weighted with 17 years of unanswered questions. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Colonel, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. You're too damn stubborn to die in some Afghan desert. It was meant to be reassuring, but they both knew the statistics, the odds, the reality that in their profession, luck mattered as much as skill, and both could run out without warning. Bryn left the office as the sun touched the western horizon. The temperature was already dropping. Night in the Afghan mountains came fast and cold. She moved through the base with purpose, avoiding the main thoroughfares, keeping to the shadows between prefab structures. Nigel Thornton waited by the motor pool. 62 years old, British accent worn smooth by decades abroad, the kind of operator who had seen every war from the Falklands to Fallujah. His truck was a battered Toyota that looked like every other civilian vehicle in Afghanistan. Perfect camouflage. Captain Gallagher, he said by way of greeting. Colonel Blackwood said you needed transport. Can you get me within 5 miles of these coordinates? She showed him the GPS location. Thornton studied the display, his weathered face impassive. That's rough country. Lots about Taliban activity in that sector. You planning on starting a war? Planning on preventing one. He nodded slowly. Understanding passed between them. The kind of understanding that came from shared experience in the gray areas where official orders met operational reality. Saw Russian advisors during the Cold War, Thornton said as they climbed into the truck. Back when they were officially not in Afghanistan, they had a smell about them. Professional, organized, not like the Mujahideen fighters we were training. He started the engine. I'm smelling that same smell now. They drove in silence through the gathering darkness. The roads were little more than tracks carved into ancient stone. Thornton navigated without headlights, using only the ambient moonlight and decades of experience. Every kilometer took them deeper into territory where American forces existed only in armored convoys and air support. 5 miles from the target coordinates, Thornton stopped the truck in a dried riverbed. "This is as far as I go," he said. "My contract doesn't cover getting shot at. Yours apparently does." Bryn shouldered her pack and rifle case. "If I'm not back by a 400, tell Colonel Blackwood everything went sideways. If you're not back by a 400, I'll tell her you went out like a bloody hero, but I prefer you came back and told her yourself." She moved into the darkness, alone, the way she preferred to work. The weight of her gear was familiar, comforting. Each piece had its place. Each item served a purpose. Nothing wasted, nothing frivolous. The terrain was brutal, jagged rocks that tore at equipment, loose scree that shifted underfoot, dry riverbeds that could become flash floods with one storm. She moved slowly, methodically, using the land for concealment, stopping every 100 meters to listen, to observe, to ensure she hadn't been detected. 3 miles from the village she heard it, the distant sound of diesel engines, heavy vehicles, moving in convoy. She dropped flat against a boulder and pulled out her night vision monocular. Through the green-washed display, she counted 6 trucks, Russian-made Ural 4320s, not the kind of vehicles Taliban fighters used. These were military-grade, well-maintained, moving with the precision of trained operators, and they were heading directly toward the coordinates where Sawyer's team would insert in less than 2 hours. Bryn's pulse remained steady as she documented everything: photographs, video, GPS coordinates, evidence. She moved parallel to the convoy's route, maintaining distance using terrain to mask her approach. By the time she reached her observation position overlooking the target village, the full scope of what was happening became clear. This wasn't an insurgent meeting. It was an execution ground. The village was a killing field, carefully prepared and meticulously organized. Russian-made Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns positioned on rooftops. Mortar tubes pre-registered on the exact coordinates where Sawyer's helicopters would land. RPG teams dug into spider holes with perfect fields of fire. And everywhere the organized chaos of professional soldiers preparing an ambush. She counted 43 insurgents. But these weren't the poorly trained fighters who usually engaged American forces. These men moved with military precision, checking weapons, conducting communications checks, following orders from commanders who understood combined arms tactics. Through her rifle scope, Bryn documented every position, every weapon, every field of fire. The evidence was damning. This was a professional military operation, funded, trained, coordinated, and someone on the American side had provided the exact coordinates where Sawyer's team would be most vulnerable. She was reaching for the satellite phone when she heard the sound behind her, soft, almost imperceptible. The whisper of cloth against stone. 5 insurgents materialized from positions she should have checked, should have cleared. In her focus on the village, she had missed the security patrol. The lead fighter spoke in accented English. American woman should not play at war. Bryn's hand moved toward her sidearm. Fast. She cleared leather and put 2 rounds through the first fighter's chest before the others could react. The suppressed Glock made sounds like sharp coughs in the night air. The second fighter died before his rifle reached his shoulder. Headshot. Center mass, the kind of shooting that came from thousands of hours of training. The third rushed her with a knife. Bryn dropped her pistol and drew her own blade, the one her mother had carried, 7 inches of carbon steel with a handle worn smooth by years of use. They collided in silence. No shouting, no wasted breath. Just two professionals trying to kill each other as efficiently as possible. He was stronger, taller, heavier, but she was faster. She was trained in a style that assumed you would always be smaller than your opponent. She used his momentum against him, redirected his knife thrust into empty air, stepped inside his guard, and drove her blade up beneath his ribs. Found his heart on the first try. He died quietly, professionally, the way they both had been trained. The fourth and fifth fighters hit her together. No more attempts at silence. One grabbed her knife arm. The other drove a fist into her kidney. Pain exploded through her torso, but she kept moving, kept fighting, used the one holding her arm as a pivot point, and drove both boots into the other's chest. He staggered back. She wrenched free from the first fighter's grip, but not before his knife opened a cut across her forearm. Blood dark and wet soaked through her sleeve. She was reaching for her rifle when they overwhelmed her with numbers. Professional, efficient. One kick swept her legs, another drove the air from her lungs. And then there were hands. Too many hands, restraining, controlling, disarming. They took her Glock, her knife, her rifle, the satellite phone, everything. But they missed the emergency beacon in her boot heel, the small transmitter that would broadcast her position to anyone monitoring the right frequency. With her last moment of freedom before they bound her hands, Bryn pressed the activation stud. If she died here, at least someone would know where. At least the evidence she had gathered would survive. The fighters hauled her to her feet, zip-tied her wrists behind her back with the casual efficiency of men who had done this many times before. One of them spoke rapidly into a radio in Pashto, reporting, requesting instructions. They dragged her toward the village, toward the ambush site where in 90 minutes Sawyer's helicopters would descend into a carefully prepared kill zone, toward whatever fate awaited an American soldier captured behind enemy lines. But as they moved through the darkness, Bryn's mind was already working, already calculating, already planning. She had been trained for this. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Sears School had been designed to prepare prisoners for exactly this situation. The zip ties were tight, but not tight enough, not for someone who had been taught by instructors who understood that restraints were temporary and resolve was permanent. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, from that last visit before deployment, the last time they had spoken. When the moment comes, you'll know. Trust your training. Trust yourself. You're my legacy baby girl. Bryn Gallagher had 37 confirmed kills, had survived 14 months in one of the most dangerous combat zones on Earth, had earned her place in a profession that did everything possible to reject her. And she was her mother's daughter. Whatever waited in that village, whatever trap had been set, whatever conspiracy had killed Kathleen Gallagher and was now trying to kill more American soldiers, she would stop it, or die trying. The village lights grew brighter as they approached. Bryn's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds, assessing options. The ceramic blade hidden in her boot collar pressed against her calf, a final backup weapon that they had missed in their search. In the darkness ahead, she could hear voices, American voices, speaking English. One she recognized despite the 17 years since she had last heard it on television news. General Victor Brennan was in the village, and suddenly everything made terrible sense. The compound door opened to reveal 3 Americans bound and gagged in the corner. Aid workers from the markings on their torn clothing. 2 men, 1 woman, all in their late 20s, faces bruised, eyes carrying the hollow look of people who had stopped believing in rescue. The woman looked up as Bryn was shoved inside. Recognition flickered across her face. The recognition of one American seeing another in impossible circumstances. A moment of shared nationality in a place where that meant everything and nothing. Bryn's tactical mind cataloged the room automatically. 7 armed insurgents, 3 hostages, 1 exit, weapons rack 15 feet to her left, 2 windows facing the courtyard, structural support beam that could provide cover, everything filed away for later use. The insurgent leader entered behind her, mid-40s, well-fed, expensive watch on his wrist. The kind of man who profited from war while others died in it. His English was American accented, educated, probably in the States. Captain Bryn Gallagher, he read from a dossier that looked disturbingly official. 37 confirmed kills. Daughter of Lieutenant Commander Kathleen Gallagher killed in action 2007. Top of her class at sniper school. Blocked from promotion twice. He smiled without warmth. The Americans and their glass ceilings, even in war. Aziz Kamal, Brin replied, recognizing him from intelligence briefings. High-value target, $15 million bounty. You're worth more dead than most people are alive. Kamal laughed. American women play soldier. Very entertaining. But war is not entertainment, Captain. War is business. He gestured to one of his men, who cut the gag from the female hostage's mouth. The woman gasped for air, coughing. Tell her, Kamal ordered. The woman's voice was hoarse from screaming. They took us 3 days ago. From a medical clinic in Kandahar. They kept saying soldiers were coming tonight. That were bait. Brin's assessment had been correct. The hostages weren't leverage. They were stage dressing. Justification for a rescue operation. Justification for sending American helicopters into a kill zone where Russian anti-aircraft guns waited with perfect firing solutions. Your general is very predictable, Kamal continued. He provides coordinates. We provide bodies. Taliban takes blame. Everyone profits. This has happened before. 4 times, 47 American soldiers dead across 3 provinces. Each time blamed on Taliban ambushes. Each time investigated and filed away as combat losses. Kamal pulled a tablet from his vest. Would you like to see? He showed her photographs, crash sites, destroyed helicopters, body bags, American flags draped over coffins. Each image was a knife to the chest. Each represented families destroyed, lives ended, futures stolen. One photograph made her blood freeze. A crash site in Anbar province, Iraq, 2007. FA-18 wreckage scattered across desert sand. The tail number was partially visible through the smoke and destruction. Her mother's aircraft. This one was expensive, Kamal said, noticing her reaction. Your mother was investigating contractor fraud. Very inconvenient for certain parties. The men who killed her paid well for the service. Brin lunged, pure instinct, pure rage. But the insurgents were ready. 2 grabbed her arms. Another drove a fist into her solar plexus. She doubled over, gasping, vision blurring. Emotional, Kamal observed. Just like your mother. She was emotional too, crying about missing funds and dead contractors. No one cares about such things, Captain. Money flows where money flows. Those who understand this become rich. Those who don't become casualties. The door opened again. American voices in the courtyard. English spoken with the authority of rank. Brin's head came up despite the pain radiating through her torso. General Victor Brennan walked into the room like he owned it. Behind him came the man Colonel Blackwood had identified as Major Volkov. Both wore field uniforms. Both carried themselves with the confidence of men who believed they were untouchable. Brennan stopped when he saw Brin. No surprise, no shock, just cold calculation. Captain Gallagher, he said, predictable as your mother. The room tilted, not from pain, from understanding. Brennan had expected her, had known Blackwood would send someone, had planned for it. This wasn't just an ambush, it was a trap within a trap. A conspiracy so deep it anticipated resistance. You're selling out your own men, Brin said through gritted teeth. Brennan circled her slowly, predatory. Selling out suggests betrayal, but there's no betrayal here, just business. Contractors need justification for increased security budgets. Taliban needs weapons. Russian intelligence needs instability. Everyone gets what they want. Except the soldiers who die. Casualties of war, Captain. Every military operation accepts acceptable losses. I'm simply ensuring those losses serve a greater purpose. A profitable purpose. Major Volkov moved to the communications equipment in the corner. Banks of radios and computers that tracked American military frequencies. Real-time intelligence on friendly force movements. The kind of technology that made ambushes into certainties. Kathleen was getting too close. Brennan continued, his voice conversational. Clinical. She found the money trails. The contractors billing for services never rendered. The weapons shipments that disappeared into black markets. She was going to testify to the Inspector General. He paused. The FA-18 malfunction cost me $100,000, but it was worth every penny. The words hit harder than any physical blow. 17 years of believing her mother died honorably, died in combat, died serving something greater than herself. And now this, the truth delivered casually by the man who had ordered her murder. Bryn lunged again, harder this time, faster, driven by 17 years of grief transformed into fury. She broke free from one insurgent's grip, got 3 steps toward Brennan before they tackled her. The general watched with detached interest as they forced her back to her knees. Then he punched her. Direct, efficient, a fist driven into her stomach with military precision. Air exploded from her lungs, pain radiated through her core. She doubled over, gagging, fighting to breathe. "That's for making me work tonight," Brennan said. "I had plans, a decent meal, proper scotch. Instead, I'm in this shithole dealing with another Gallagher who doesn't understand her place." He grabbed her hair, forced her head up, made her look at him. "You'll watch your team die, Captain. Every last one of them. You'll watch those helicopters get shredded by Russian anti-aircraft fire. You'll hear them scream on the radio as they burn. And then you'll tell us everything about base defenses, patrol schedules, weaknesses." He leaned closer. "And then you'll join your mother. Another casualty of war. Another woman who played soldier and lost." Bryn's vision swam. Blood filled her mouth from where she'd bitten her tongue. But through the pain, through the rage, her mind was working, calculating, the zip ties around her wrists, the ceramic blade in her boot collar, the distances, the angles, everything her mother had taught her about staying alive when the odds said you should die. "She was worth 100 of you," Bryn gasped. Brennan released her hair, her head dropped forward. "She was worth nothing. Like you, weak, girls playing at something you'll never understand." The insurgents forced her into a kneeling position before the communications equipment. Radio displays showed 2 helicopters approaching from the south. Call signs Nightbird 1 and Nightbird 2. Sawyer's team in the backup element. The clock on the wall read 23:55. 5 minutes to insertion. Through the pain, through the fury building in her chest, Bryn heard the radio transmissions. Sawyer's voice, calm, professional, reporting their approach to the landing zone. And beneath it, another voice, Colonel Blackwood, on the backup helicopter. Her mentor had come herself, hadn't sent another officer, hadn't stayed safe at the base. She had loaded onto a helicopter and flown into danger because that's what leaders did. That's what Kathleen Gallagher had done. That's what every officer worth following had always done. 12 lives on Nightbird 1, 12 more on Nightbird 2, 24 Americans who would die in the next 5 minutes if Bryn didn't act. Nightbird 1, 5 mics to LZ. Sawyer's voice crackled over the radio. Volkov positioned himself at the window with a laser designator, the kind that guided anti-aircraft fire with terminal precision. Outside, Bryn could hear the distant thump of rotor blades, getting closer, getting louder. Brennan stood beside the radio equipment, watching the displays like a man watching a sporting event. Casual, relaxed, confident in his victory. The insurgents had zip-tied her wrists behind her back, standard technique, effective against most prisoners. But Bryn had spent 2 weeks at SEER school learning from instructors who understood that restraints only worked if the prisoner cared about pain. She began the process. Subtle, invisible, shifting her weight, testing the zip-tie tension, preparing. Her mother's letter echoed in memory, the one Colonel Blackwood had shown her just hours ago. "When the moment comes, you'll know. Trust your training, trust yourself. You're my legacy, baby girl." The moment was now. Bryn focused on her breathing, slowed her heart rate, entered the calm space where training became instinct, where thought became action, where impossible became merely difficult. The ceramic blade pressed against her calf, 4 inches of non-metallic composite, designed by SEAL instructors for exactly this situation, hidden in a boot collar that looked like standard military issue, missed by searchers who checked for metal but not for modern materials. Nightbird 1, 2 mics to LZ. The radio transmission pulled everyone's attention to the window, to the approaching helicopters, to the kill zone they were about to enter. Everyone except Bryn. She dislocated her right thumb, one smooth motion. The technique taught in week 2 of SEER school. Excruciatingly painful, temporarily crippling, but effective. Her thumb joint separated with a sensation like tearing fabric. Pain exploded through her hand. She bit her tongue harder, tasted more blood, used the pain to fuel her focus. With her thumb dislocated, her hand narrowed. The zip tie that had been tight became merely firm. She pulled, twisted. The plastic cut into her skin, drew blood, but her hand slipped through. 1 second, her free right hand reached down to her boot collar, found the hidden compartment, extracted the ceramic blade. 4 inches of salvation. Her fingers closed around the handle. Muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions took over. 2 seconds. She angled the blade upward behind her back, found the zip tie on her left wrist, a single draw cut with the razor-sharp edge. The plastic parted like tissue paper. 3 seconds. Both hands free now, the blade hidden in her palm. She remained kneeling, bound in appearance if not in fact. 7 armed men in the room, none watching her, all focused on the radio, on Volkov at the window, on the approaching helicopters. Nightbird 1:30 seconds to LZ. Volkov spoke into his radio in Russian. Weapons authorization. Fire on my mark. The anti-aircraft guns would open up the moment the helicopters entered their engagement envelope. 12 seconds of concentrated fire. Maybe less, enough to shred both aircraft, enough to kill everyone aboard. 4 seconds. Brin exploded upward. 8 feet separated her from General Brennan. She covered the distance before his brain could process movement into threat, before his hand could move toward his sidearm, before any of the insurgents could react. She drove into him like a linebacker. Low center of gravity, her weight and momentum concentrated into his midsection. He was 6'2" and 200 pounds. She was 5'4" and 125. Physics said he should have absorbed the impact. But physics didn't account for training, for rage, for 17 years of grief transformed into kinetic energy. Brennan stumbled backward, crashed into the radio equipment. Displays sparked, chairs toppled, and Brin was already moving, already flowing, already executing. 5 seconds. Her left arm locked around his throat from behind. Chokehold, cutting off blood flow to the brain, not air. Blood, the kind of hold that rendered someone unconscious in 8 seconds if applied correctly. Her right hand brought the ceramic blade to his carotid artery, pressed the edge against his skin, just enough pressure to break the surface, to draw blood, to make her point absolutely clear. "Abort code now," she hissed into his ear, "or I open your carotid and you bleed out in 90 seconds. The room froze. 7 insurgents with AK-47s, all raised, all pointed at her, at Brennan, at the impossible situation they suddenly faced. Their valuable American general, their partner in profit, their access to intelligence and coordinates, all held hostage by the woman they had dismissed as weak. Brennan's face transformed. Arrogance melted into shock. Shock collapsed into terror. His eyes widened as he felt the blade break skin, as blood trickled down his neck. Warm, wet, undeniable. "You wouldn't dare," he gasped. "I've killed 37 men from 1,000 yards away." Brin whispered, "Imagine what I can do from here." She applied slightly more pressure, not enough to sever the artery, just enough to make him feel the blade sink deeper, to make him understand exactly how close to death he was, to make him realize that all his rank, all his authority, all his power meant nothing against 4 inches of ceramic and a woman who had nothing left to lose. Tears formed in Brennan's eyes. Real tears. The kind that came from genuine fear, from the understanding that he had miscalculated, that the weak girl he had mocked and dismissed now held his life in her hands. "The radio," Brin ordered, nodding toward the communications equipment. "Abort code, now, or I add you to my confirmed kills." Brennan's hands trembled as they reached for the radio handset. Blood from his neck stained his uniform collar. His voice shook when he keyed the transmission. "Nightbird flight, abort, abort, abort. Return to base. Authentication, Whiskey Tango 5. Static. Then Sawyer's voice confused. "Say again, confirm abort order." "Confirmed." Brennan's voice cracked. "Return to base immediately. Hostile fire imminent. I repeat, hostile fire imminent. Authentication Whiskey Tango 5. A pause, then Blackwood's voice, calm, professional, understanding exactly what was happening. Copy abort order. Nightbird flight, returning to base. Another pause. Bryn, we're tracking your beacon. QRF inbound. Hold position. 10 minutes. The quick reaction force was 10 minutes away. Bryn kept the blade pressed to Brennan's throat, kept her arm locked around his neck. The insurgents hadn't lowered their weapons. Kamal stood near the door calculating odds, assessing whether his partnership with Brennan was worth the risk of a firefight. Drop your weapons, Bryn commanded, or your general dies first. He's worth $2 million to you alive. $0 dead. Kamal's eyes narrowed. Business calculation. Cost-benefit analysis. The general represented access, intelligence, future opportunities. But Kamal was also a survivor, a man who understood when to cut losses. He spoke rapidly in Pashto. His men hesitated, looked to him for confirmation. He nodded slowly. Weapons lowered, not dropped, not surrendered, but lowered. A compromise between cooperation and preparation. The hostages, Bryn said, never taking her eyes off Kamal. Cut them free. One of the insurgents moved to comply, used a knife to sever the zip ties binding the 3 aid workers. The female hostage, McKenna, according to her name tag, moved immediately to secure one of the lowered weapons. The 2 men followed her lead. You were military, Bryn observed. Marines, McKenna confirmed. 2 deployments, medical discharge. She checked the AK-47's chamber with practiced efficiency. Thought I was done with this shit. None of us are ever done. Volkov remained at the window, the laser designator still in his hands, still tracking the helicopters as they turned away from the landing zone. His expression was flat, professional. A man watching millions of dollars in careful planning evaporate. He moved. Fast. Professional. Drawing a backup pistol from an ankle holster, not aiming at Bryn, aiming at the hostages, at the witnesses who could testify about American involvement, at the loose ends that needed tying. Bryn anticipated it, had been watching him, had recognized the micro-expressions that preceded violence. She shoved Brennan forward, used his body as a shield between her and the room, used the momentum to close distance with Volkov. The Russian fired twice. Both rounds impacted Brennan's back. The general screamed, went down, blood spreading across his uniform. Bryn was already inside Volkov's guard. The ceramic blade flashed, found the inside of his wrist, severed tendons. The pistol fell from nerveless fingers. He responded with a knee strike, caught her in the ribs. Pain exploded through her torso, but she kept moving, kept flowing, used his momentum against him, redirected his follow-up punch, stepped inside his reach. They collided in the center of the room. Professional violence. The kind taught in intelligence agencies and special forces. No wasted movement, no theatrical flourishes. Just 2 operators trying to kill each other with maximum efficiency. Volkov was 6'1", trained in Sistema, the Russian military combat system, built for durability and practical application. But Bryn had been trained in a style designed specifically for smaller operators. Krav Maga mixed with SEAL close-quarters combat, techniques that assumed you would always be outsized. She targeted his knees, his throat, his eyes, the vulnerable points where size mattered less than precision. He blocked, countered, drove an elbow toward her temple that would have ended the fight if it had connected. She ducked, felt the air displacement as his arm passed overhead, drove her blade up beneath his ribs, felt resistance as the ceramic encountered bone, twisted, pushed deeper, found something vital. Volkov's eyes widened. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He tried to speak, managed only a wet cough. Then his legs failed. He collapsed. Bryn stepped back, breathing hard, ribs screaming, right thumb still dislocated and useless, but alive, still fighting. Kamal made his move during the chaos, rushing toward the weapons rack with 2 of his men, trying to salvage something from the disaster, trying to regain control. McKenna fired first. 3-round burst, center mass, professional marksmanship. The first insurgent went down. The second turned toward her. Bryn threw the ceramic blade, 4 inches of composite steel over 8 feet. It tumbled twice before the point found his throat. He dropped. Kamal reached the weapons rack, got his hands on an RPG launcher, swung it toward Bryn. His finger found the trigger. She grabbed a chair, threw it. The furniture impacted the launcher just as Kamal fired. The rocket motor ignited. The warhead launched at an angle, impacted the ceiling instead of Bryn. Explosion, concussion. The world became noise and dust and falling debris. When the dust cleared, Kamal was on the ground, stunned, bleeding from his ears. The RPG had detonated too close. The overpressure had done what bullets couldn't. Bryn knelt beside him, put her knee on his chest, applied pressure, made it hard to breathe. 4 ambushes, she said. 47 soldiers. My mother, you're going to tell me everything. Every name, every payment, every person who profited from American blood. Kamal coughed, tried to speak, managed only a wheeze. Outside, the sound of helicopters grew louder. Not leaving. Returning. The QRF. Colonel Blackwood and 24 heavily armed soldiers coming to finish what Bryn had started. The compound door exploded inward. Flashbangs, smoke, shouted commands in English. American soldiers poured through the breach. Weapons up, controlled aggression, professional violence delivered with overwhelming force. Colonel Blackwood entered behind the assault element, took in the scene with a single sweep. Bryn kneeling on Kamal, Brennan bleeding on the floor, Volkov dead, 3 liberated hostages holding weapons, 7 insurgents in various states of injury or surrender. Captain Gallagher, Blackwood said. Situation report. Bryn stood slowly. Her right thumb hung at an unnatural angle. Blood soaked through her sleeve from the knife wound. Bruises were already forming across her ribs, but she came to attention. Professional, despite everything. Hostages secure, Colonel. Enemy neutralized. Evidence of treason preserved. She gestured toward the communications equipment. Everything recorded, 4 previous operations. 47 killed in action. Names, dates, payment records. Blackwood moved to the equipment, started reviewing displays. Her expression hardened with each screen, each piece of evidence, each confirmation of betrayal. This goes deep, she said quietly. Contractors, intelligence officers, field-grade officers across multiple services. Brennan groaned from the floor, still alive despite Volkov's bullets. Body armor had caught both rounds. Bruised ribs, maybe a fractured sternum, but alive, conscious, aware of exactly how badly everything had failed. I want a deal, he gasped. I'll testify. Full disclosure. Just take the death penalty off the table. Bryn looked down at him, this man who had killed her mother, who had sold out 47 soldiers, who had called her weak, who had struck her, who had believed his rank and authority made him untouchable. My mother died serving her country, she said quietly. You profited from killing people who served theirs. There's no deal. There's no immunity. There's just justice. Finally, Sawyer appeared in the doorway, his team behind him, all alive, all safe, because Bryn had acted, because she had refused to let more soldiers die. Captain Gallagher, Sawyer said, his voice carried something that might have been awe. You saved us, all of us. Just doing my job, Lieutenant. But they both knew it was more than that. It was 17 years of questions answered, 17 years of grief transformed into action, 17 years of being underestimated, finally proving everyone wrong. A medic approached Bryn, young, competent, started assessing injuries. The dislocated thumb made him wince. This is going to hurt, Captain. Everything hurts, she replied. Fix it anyway. He worked quickly, professional, reset the thumb with a sharp pull and twist. The joint relocated with a pop that made everyone nearby flinch. Bryn's vision went white for a moment, but she didn't scream, didn't cry out, just breathed through it the way she'd been taught. The medic wrapped her forearm, checked her ribs, confirmed nothing broken, but everything bruised. You need a hospital, ma'am. I need a working thumb and a rifle. Hospital can wait. Blackwood supervised the evidence collection, photographing everything, documenting the communications logs, securing the laptops and hard drives that contained the full conspiracy. This wasn't just about Brennan. This was about a network, a system, a corruption that had infected multiple levels of the military and defense establishment. How deep does it go? Bryn asked. Deep enough that we need to take this to someone outside normal channels, someone who can't be compromised. Blackwood looked at the evidence. This is Inspector General level, maybe higher. The prisoners were zip-tied and hooded, loaded onto helicopters for transport back to base and then to detention facilities. Brennan remained conscious throughout, aware of his failure, aware that his attempt to silence another Gallagher had backfired exactly as spectacularly as the first. As they prepared to extract McKenna, approached Bryn. "Thank you," the former Marine said, "for not leaving us, for coming anyway." "Someone left us once," Bryn replied. "I wasn't going to repeat the mistake." The flight back to Phobie Reaper was quiet, soldiers processing what had happened, what they had survived, what Bryn had prevented. She sat beside a window watching the Afghan landscape pass beneath in the darkness. Her right thumb throbbed. Her ribs ached with each breath. Her forearm burned where the knife had cut. But she was alive. More importantly, 24 soldiers were alive. 24 families who wouldn't receive casualty notifications. 24 futures that would continue. And her mother's death finally made sense. Not acceptable, not justified, but understood. Kathleen Gallagher had died fighting corruption, had died trying to protect the soldiers she served with, had died of doing exactly what Bryn had done tonight. Legacy. The word took on new meaning. It wasn't about breaking barriers or being first. It was about standing up when standing up cost everything. It was about fighting for what was right, even when the odds said you should quit. Kathleen had done that, and now Bryn had too. The helicopter touched down at Phobie Reaper as dawn broke over the eastern mountains. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful. Terrible. The kind of sunrise that made you grateful to be alive to see it. Colonel Blackwood approached as Bryn climbed down from the aircraft. "There's going to be an investigation," she said. "Multiple investigations. This goes too high to cover up. Senators, defense contractors, intelligence services. It's going to be ugly." "Good," Bryn replied. "Ugly means honest. Ugly means everyone sees what happened. Ugly means it can't happen again. You'll have to testify, probably for months, every detail, every moment." "I've got nothing but time and triumph, Colonel." Blackwood smiled slightly, the first real smile Bryn had seen from her. "Your mother would be so damn proud." The words hit harder than any punch, harder than Brennan's fist, harder than anything physical could ever hit. Because they were true. Because after 17 years of wondering if she was living up to her mother's legacy, she finally knew. She had. 3 weeks later, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The military tribunal convened in a windowless room that smelled of old coffee and institutional disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the steady drone of bureaucracy grinding forward. Bryn sat at the witness table in her dress uniform, every ribbon and medal aligned with parade ground precision. The Distinguished Service Cross would come later. Today was about truth. The panel consisted of 7 officers, 3 generals, 2 colonels, a Navy captain, and a JAG Corps attorney who looked like she had spent the last month preparing for this moment. Their faces were carved from stone, professional, neutral. But Bryn could read the tension beneath the surface. This wasn't just another court-martial. This was an earthquake. "Captain Gallagher," the senior general began. His name tape read Hartwell, 3 stars on his collar. Ranger tab, combat infantry badge, a man who had earned his place through decades of service. "Please state for the record your involvement in the events of November 7th. Bryn's testimony lasted 8 hours. She spoke without notes, without hesitation. Every detail committed to memory with the same precision she applied to range calculations and wind calls. The Russian ammunition, the tactical maps with Cyrillic notations, General Brennan's public humiliation, Colonel Blackwood's warning, the infiltration, the ambush site, the capture, the 5 seconds. When she described dislocating her thumb to escape the zip ties, several officers winced. When she detailed Brennan's confession about her mother's death, the room fell absolutely silent. And when she explained driving the ceramic blade to his throat, forcing the abort code saving 24 lives, the senior general leaned back in his chair with an expression that might have been respect. "The communications equipment," the JAG attorney interjected. You stated it, recorded everything. Yes, ma'am. 4 previous operations. Dates, coordinates, names of participating officers, payment records from contractors, encrypted communications with Russian intelligence. Everything needed to map the entire network. The attorney pulled up a display, spreadsheets, financial records, communications logs. Can you identify this document? Bryn studied the screen, recognized the format immediately. That's a payment ledger, contractor accounts. The highlighted entry shows a $100,000 transfer dated February 11th, 2007, 3 days before my mother's FA-18 went down. And the recipient designated as maintenance services rendered. But the routing information traces back to a shell company owned by a defense contractor that specialized in aircraft systems. Sabotage, the senior general said. Not a question, a statement. Yes, sir. My mother was investigating $50 million in fraudulent reconstruction contracts. She was scheduled to testify to the Inspector General on February 15th. Her aircraft malfunctioned on February 14th. The investigation concluded enemy fire. The evidence suggests otherwise. The forensic accountant took the stand next, a civilian specialist from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. He walked the panel through the money trail with the enthusiasm of someone who loved finding needles in haystacks. Shell companies, offshore accounts, wire transfers disguised as legitimate business expenses. The network spans 12 years, he testified. Multiple services, multiple contractors. We've identified payments totaling $83 million. The scheme was elegant. Use real combat operations as cover. Create ambush situations where casualties appear legitimate. Blame Taliban. Contractors receive increased security budgets. Officers receive kickbacks. Russian intelligence receives destabilization of American operations. Everyone profits except the soldiers who die. The panel asked questions for another hour. Technical details, legal specifics, chain of custody for evidence, all the bureaucratic machinery necessary to ensure convictions would hold up under appeal. Then General Brennan took the stand. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The injuries from Volokov's bullets had healed but left him moving stiffly. The arrogance that had defined him in Afghanistan was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of a man watching his life's work collapse. His attorney had negotiated a deal. Full testimony in exchange for life imprisonment instead of execution. The death penalty remained on the table if he failed to cooperate completely. Brennan cooperated. For 6 hours, he detailed the conspiracy, named names, provided account numbers, explained how the network had evolved from small-scale fraud in Iraq to systemic corruption spanning 3 theaters of operation. He described meetings with contractors, communications with Russian handlers, the careful calculation of which units to sacrifice for maximum profit. Why, the senior general finally asked, the question that transcended legal proceedings, the question that got to the heart of betrayal. Brennan's voice was flat, affectless. Money initially. The contractors offered substantial compensation for classified information. Then it became Martbone. Power, access, the knowledge that I controlled events rather than reacted to them. He paused. And if I'm being honest, sir, I resented officers like Lieutenant Commander Gallagher. Women who made me look weak by comparison, who succeeded despite every obstacle I placed in their path. So you had her killed. I authorized the payment that led to her aircraft's sabotage. Yes, sir. The room was silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Everyone processing the casual admission of murder, of treason, of betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. And the 47 soldiers killed in subsequent ambushes, acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. They weren't objectives. Bryn's voice cut through the silence. They were people, soldiers, Americans. My mother was a person general, not a problem to be eliminated, not an obstacle to your profit. The senior general raised a hand. Captain Gallagher, please. But Brennan turned to face her, met her eyes for the first time since his testimony began. Your mother was brilliant, dedicated, everything a naval officer should be. But she didn't understand how the world actually works. Neither do you. In 20 years, someone else will be sitting where I am. Different names, same system. Because the system is bigger than any one person, even you. Then I'll spend 20 years dismantling it, Bryn replied, one traitor at a time. The tribunal concluded at 1800 hours. Verdicts would take weeks, but everyone in the room knew the outcome. Brennan would spend the rest of his life in military prison. His network would be prosecuted. Careers would end. Investigations would ripple through the Pentagon like seismic shocks. And somewhere in all that bureaucracy, justice would finally be served. Bryn walked out of the building into North Carolina humidity that felt like breathing through wet cotton. Her dress uniform was soaked with sweat. Her thumb still ached despite 3 weeks of healing. But she was done. 8 hours of testimony. 8 hours of reliving the worst night of her life. 8 hours of ensuring her mother's death meant something. Colonel Blackwood waited by a government sedan. She had been promoted to brigadier general 2 weeks ago. 1 star on her collar, the beginning of the rank her abilities deserved. "How are you holding up?" Blackwood asked. "I'm standing. That's more than I expected 3 weeks ago." They drove in silence through the base, past training facilities where young Marines learned to be soldiers, past memorials honoring those who had died in service, past the everyday machinery of military life that continued regardless of scandals or tribunals. "I've been authorized to offer you a position," Blackwood said. "Joint Task Force Phoenix, counterintelligence and counter-corruption. Small unit, hand-picked operators. Mission is to investigate and eliminate the remaining network members. Hunt down the contractors, the Russian handlers, everyone who profited from American deaths. When do I start? After you heal, after you receive your medal, after you've had time to process everything that's happened." Bryn looked out the window at Marines conducting training exercises, young faces, determined expressions, the next generation learning to serve, learning to sacrifice, trusting that their leaders would use them honorably. "My mother didn't get time to process," she said quietly. "The 47 soldiers didn't get time to heal. I'll take the position now." "Bryn, I'll take it now, General, because somewhere right now someone else is planning another ambush. Someone else is selling intelligence to the enemy. Someone else is calculating acceptable losses. And every day I wait is another day they operate freely." Blackwood nodded slowly, understanding, not agreeing with the decision, but understanding it. "Promotion to major comes with the assignment. You'll have 12 operators under your command, mix of special forces, intelligence specialists, and federal investigators. Full access to classified networks. Budget for international operations. And the first target, GRU Colonel Fedorov, Volkov's handler, operating out of Eastern Europe. He coordinated the Russian side of the conspiracy, provided intelligence, arranged weapons shipments, ensured Taliban received support necessary to maintain pressure on American forces. Then that's where we start." 2 weeks later, Arlington National Cemetery. The ceremony was small, family only with a few exceptions for military personnel. Bryn's father stood beside her in his retired Marine uniform, 58 years old, silver-haired, carrying the weight of losing his wife to what he had believed was honorable combat. Now knowing the truth, processing 17 years of lies. Her younger brother Daniel stood on her other side, 22, Army Ranger, following the family tradition into service. He hadn't spoken much since learning about their mother's death. Anger and grief competed for control of his expression. The headstone was white marble. Simple. Elegant. Lieutenant Commander Kathleen Ann Gallagher, 1969-2007. Below the dates, a new inscription, "Murdered in service to truth." The addition had required special authorization, required the tribunal's findings to be officially acknowledged, required the Navy to admit that one of their officers had been killed by American corruption rather than enemy action. General Rebecca Hartwell stood at attention before the assembled group. 3 stars, 56 years old, combat veteran of 2 wars, the kind of officer who had broken through barriers by being too competent to ignore. "Captain Bryn Gallagher," she said formally, "for extraordinary heroism in combat operations, for actions above and beyond the call of duty, for preventing catastrophic loss of American lives through personal courage and tactical excellence. It is my honor to present you with the Distinguished Service Cross." She pinned the medal to Bryn's uniform. The ribbon was distinctive, blue with a white and red stripe. The medal itself was bronze, a cross with an eagle in the center, the second highest award for valor. One step below the Medal of Honor, the citation was carefully worded. Mentioned the rescue of hostages, the prevention of an ambush, the neutralization of enemy forces. Avoided specific details still classified, but everyone present understood what it represented. 15 lives saved, a conspiracy exposed, justice for 48 fallen soldiers. After the ceremony, General Hartwell pulled Bryn aside. They walked among the white headstones, thousands of markers representing thousands of lives given in service. The weight of sacrifice made visible in precise rows extending to the horizon. Your mother was investigating contractor fraud when she died, Hartwell said. The official record now reflects that. But there's more. Classified files we recovered from Brennan's network. She handed Bryn a manila folder. Your mother didn't just find fraud. She found evidence of systematic corruption dating back to 1990, defense contractors billing for phantom services, officers accepting kickbacks, a network that has existed for over 25 years. Bryn opened the folder, recognized her mother's handwriting in the margins. Notes, calculations, names circled and connected with lines showing relationships. A conspiracy map that had gotten her killed. She knew, Bryn said quietly. She knew how deep it went, and she was going to expose all of it. Task Force Phoenix's mission isn't just about Brennan's network. It's about finishing what your mother started, dismantling the entire system. Some of the officers she identified are still in positions of authority, still profiting, still operating. Your mother started this investigation in 2006, a year before she died. She found patterns going back to the Kosovo conflict in 1999. The same contractors, the same patterns of fraud. 25 years of systematic theft from American taxpayers and American soldiers. Names. Hartwell pointed to 3 entries circled in red on her mother's notes. 2 contractors, 1 senator, all still alive, all still influential. They're secondary targets after we eliminate the immediate threats, but they're on the list. Hartwell met Bryn's eyes. Your mother started this investigation 25 years ago. You're going to finish it. How long will it take? Years, maybe decades. This isn't a single conspiracy, it's a culture, a system. Changing it requires patience, persistence, the willingness to keep fighting even when progress feels impossible. Bryn looked at her mother's grave, at the woman who had fought corruption and paid with her life, at the legacy that had defined Bryn's existence since she was 10 years old. Then will take years, decades, whatever it requires. That evening, Bryn returned to her mother's grave alone. The cemetery was quiet. Most visitors had left. Security personnel maintained discreet distance. She knelt on the grass, placed her hand on the marble headstone. I found them, Mom, she said quietly. Found the people who killed you. Made them pay. Made them confess. Made sure the world knows you didn't die in combat. You died fighting for what was right. The Distinguished Service Cross ribbon was pinned to her uniform, but she reached into her pocket and pulled out something more important. The photograph she had carried through 14 months of deployment, her mother in flight suit, standing beside her FA-18, young, confident, alive. I'm not done, Bryn continued. There are others, the people you identified in your investigation, the network that's existed since before I was born. I'm going to dismantle all of it, every piece, every person, until there's nothing left of the corruption that killed you. She pulled out her mother's last letter, the one Colonel Blackwood had shown her what felt like a lifetime ago. The paper was worn from repeated handling, but the words remained clear. Bryn, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. The fraud I found runs deep. They'll call it enemy fire. Don't believe them. If I can't finish this, maybe you will. I know you'll be strong. Aim true, you're my legacy baby girl. Be the soldier I tried to be. Love always, Mom. I will be, Bryn whispered. I promise. 6 months later, classified location, Virginia. The briefing room was intentionally nondescript. Gray walls, standard government furniture, no windows, nothing to indicate it housed one of the most sensitive units in the American intelligence community. Major Bryn Gallagher stood before 12 operators, the best the military had to offer. 2 from Delta Force, 3 Navy SEALs, 2 Marine Force Reconnaissance, 3 CIA Special Activities Division, 2 FBI counterintelligence specialists, all volunteers, all carefully vetted, all committed to the mission. Lieutenant Griffin Sawyer sat in the front row, her former spotter, now her executive officer, promoted to captain, assigned to Task Force Phoenix at Bryn's personal request. Loyal, competent, someone who had proven himself under fire. Joint Task Force Phoenix, Bryn began. Our mission is simple in concept, difficult in execution. We hunt corruption, we eliminate traitors, we dismantle networks that profit from American deaths. She activated the display screen. Photographs appeared. Colonel Fedorov, Russian GRU, mid-50s, Volkov's handler and the architect of Russian support for the Taliban ambushes. Primary target, currently operating in Budapest, officially attached to Russian embassy as military liaison, actually coordinating intelligence operations across Eastern Europe. He provided the communications equipment used in the Afghan ambushes. He arranged weapon shipments. He ensured Taliban had resources necessary to engage American forces effectively. One of the SEALs raised his hand. Rules of engagement. Capture if possible. Eliminate if necessary. Priority is obtaining intelligence on his network. Secondary priority is ensuring he never operates against American interests again. She clicked to the next slide. 3 additional targets. The contractors her mother had identified 25 years ago, all still active, all still profiting. Secondary targets. These individuals have been involved in defense contractor fraud for over 2 decades. They bribed the officers who killed my mother. They facilitated the network that led to 47 additional deaths. They represent systematic corruption that must be eliminated. Bryn paused, made eye contact with each operator. This unit exists because my mother died trying to expose corruption, because General Brennan killed 47 soldiers for profit, because the system failed to protect the people it was designed to serve. We are the correction. We are the consequence. We are the promise that betrayal will not be tolerated. The briefing continued for 2 hours. Technical details, operational timelines, intelligence assessments, equipment requirements, all the planning necessary to conduct operations across multiple countries with the full backing of American intelligence resources. As the operators filed out to begin preparations, Brigadier General Blackwood entered. She reviewed the target packages with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades in intelligence work. Fedorov is well protected, she observed. Russian embassy security, FSB counterintelligence, electronic surveillance. Getting to him will be difficult. Difficult isn't impossible. No, but it's dangerous. You'll be operating in hostile territory. If you're caught, the diplomatic fallout will be substantial. Bryn thought about her mother, about 17 years of believing a lie, about the 47 soldiers whose families believed their loved ones died honorably in combat, about all the betrayals that had been classified and buried and forgotten. Then we won't get caught. Blackwood smiled slightly. Your mother said the same thing before her last deployment. She was investigating fraud. She knew it was dangerous. She went anyway because it was the right thing to do. And she died because of it. She died because she was one person against the system. You have a team, you have resources, you have institutional support from officers who are tired of watching corruption destroy the military from within. Blackwood placed a hand on Bryn's shoulder. Your mother started this fight, but you don't have to finish it alone. I'm not alone. I have 12 of the best operators in the world. I have intelligence support. I have you. Bryn looked at the target photographs. And I have 17 years of motivation. The night before deployment, Bryn sat alone in the team ready room. Her gear was staged and prepared. Her rifle was clean and zeroed. Her thumb had healed completely. Everything was ready. She pulled out her mother's photograph, the one she had carried through Afghanistan, the one that had survived capture and combat and chaos. The edges were worn, the image faded slightly, but her mother's expression remained clear, confident, determined, ready to serve. Bryn had added something to her own kit, a small patch, custom made, Not officially authorized, but meaningful. It showed an eagle, wings spread, talons extended. Below it, two words aimed true. Her mother's words, her mother's legacy. Now her promise. The helicopter lifted off at dawn, 12 operators plus crew, flying east toward Europe, toward Budapest, toward Colonel Fedorov and the beginning of a campaign that would span years. Bryn sat by the window watching Virginia disappear beneath clouds. Somewhere down there was Arlington Cemetery, her mother's grave. The marble headstone with its new inscription acknowledging truth rather than comfortable lies. She touched the photograph in her pocket, felt the worn edges, the familiar weight, the connection to a woman she had barely known, but whose legacy defined her existence. "Mom," she whispered into the helicopter's ambient noise, "I'm finishing it. All of it. The people who killed you, the system that protected them, the corruption that's existed for decades. I'm dismantling every piece." Through the window, the sun rose over the Atlantic, golden light painting clouds in shades of orange and red. Beautiful, terrible. The kind of sunrise that promised both hope and challenge. Captain Sawyer moved to sit beside her. He had been with her from the beginning, had spotted for her in Afghanistan, had trusted her instincts when everyone else dismissed them, had survived because she refused to let him die. "Thinking about your mother?" he asked. "Always," Bryn replied. "Every mission, every decision, everything I do is built on what she started. She'd be proud of what you've accomplished, of what you're about to do." "I hope so, but pride isn't the goal. Justice is. Making sure no more soldiers die because someone decided profit was worth more than lives." The helicopter crossed into international airspace. The point of no return, committed now to a mission that would either succeed or end in diplomatic disaster. But Bryn had stopped worrying about failure. Failure meant maintaining the status quo. Failure meant the corruption continued. Failure meant her mother's death remained unavenged. Success meant dismantling a system, meant holding people accountable, meant ensuring the next generation of soldiers could serve without wondering if their commanders had sold them out for cash. On the helicopter's tactical display, Budapest appeared as a glowing icon, their destination, their target, the beginning of something larger. Bryn checked her rifle one final time, her mother's Remington M24. The scratch from General Brennan's disrespect had been carefully polished away, the engraving restored. For Bryn, aim true KG. She had aimed true once, 37 confirmed kills, each one a threat eliminated, each one an enemy stopped. But this mission was different. This wasn't about confirmed kills. This was about confirmed justice, about taking apart a conspiracy piece by piece, about proving that betrayal carried consequences. General Brennan had underestimated her, had dismissed her based on size and gender. But training mattered more than prejudice. Capability trumped assumption. And in one critical moment, she had proven every doubt wrong. In 5 seconds, Bryn had proven him catastrophically wrong. Now she had years to prove the entire system wrong, to show that corruption could not hide behind classification, that traitors could not escape justice, that one determined officer could make a difference. The helicopter descended toward its staging area. Engines changed pitch. The crew chief gave hand signals indicating 5 minutes to landing. Around her, operators performed final equipment checks. Professional, focused, ready. Bryn touched her mother's photograph one last time, then secured it in its protective case, sealed it away, protected it. "Legacy," she whispered. "It's not about being first. It's not about breaking barriers. It's about doing what's right, even when the cost is everything." Her mother had paid that cost. Now Bryn would ensure the payment meant something. The helicopter touched down. Ramp lowered. European air rushed in carrying unfamiliar scents and sounds. 12 operators moved out with practiced efficiency. A team, a unit, a promise made manifest. Major Bryn Gallagher was the last to exit. She paused at the ramp, looked back at the American crew chief. "See you when we get back," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Give 'em hell." She smiled. "That's the plan." And then she was moving, into the European night, into a mission that would span years, into the future her mother had died trying to create. Behind her, the helicopter lifted off. Ahead, a city full of targets and conspiracies waiting to be dismantled. Around her, 11 operators who had volunteered for something bigger than themselves. Bryn checked her rifle one final time. The Remington M24 that had belonged to her mother. The engraving restored and polished for Bryn. Aim true, KG. Aim true. Her mother's words. Her mother's legacy. And now her promise fulfilled one operation at a time. General Brennan had called her weak. The system had tried to break her. The conspiracy had attempted to silence her the same way it had silenced Kathleen. But Bryn Gallagher wasn't her mother. She had learned from Kathleen's sacrifice, had built a team, had institutional support, had the resources to finish what her mother started. The mission wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about ensuring no more soldiers died for profit, about proving that betrayal had consequences. Task Force Phoenix had just begun its work. Years of operations ahead, dozens of targets, a network that spanned continents. But tonight in Budapest, they would start. One Russian colonel, one piece of the puzzle, one step toward dismantling corruption that had existed for decades. Bryn touched the photograph in her pocket one final time. Her mother's image, worn but preserved, a reminder of why this mattered. "Watch this, Mom," she whispered into the darkness. "We're finishing what you started. Every last piece." Then she moved forward, into the shadows, into the mission, into a future where soldiers could serve without wondering if their commanders had sold them out. The hunt had begun, and Bryn Gallagher never missed.